Disaster at Christmas. Pan Am 103 never makes it home.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. The simple facts are these. Pan Am's Flight 103 had been in the air for an hour. The 747 was en route from London to New York and then Detroit. According to Pan American, there were more than 240 passengers on board and a crew of 15. It was after dark. For reasons we do not yet understand, the plane, with 50,000 gallons of fuel on board, plunged into a small Scottish market town. Pan American is not aware that any of the passengers or crew has survived. Our first report is from ABC's Barry Dunsmore.
The first pictures from the scene show strings of houses on fire. Eyewitnesses say the plane hit a gas station and several houses. Others talked of a rumbling and then a terrible explosion.
Dozens of houses are burning, and the fire brigade are being hampered in their attempts to put out the fires by the risk of a further explosion from the petrol station, which the Pan Am Jumbo hit as it crashed into the town.
Rescue services have taken a dozen people to an area hospital. They are believed to be local people suffering from burns. There is no word, but little hope for the passengers.
There's very little hope, I would have thought, for anybody who was in that plane. When it did come to Earth, as people have described locally, with an enormous flash of flame, it hit very hard.
Pan Am Flight 103 originated in Frankfurt, West Germany. There was a plane change to the 747 in London. 54 minutes after the plane took off, flying at 31,000 feet, it disappeared from radar screens in Scotland. Shortly after, it was seen crashing into the Scottish town of Lockerbie, near Scotland's border with England. In New York, a Pan Am spokesman said there was no contact with the aircraft before it crashed.
As I said, there was no prior indication that there were any problems with the aircraft. There was no contact prior, any Mayday signals. The aircraft had made normal contact with the control center.
More than a dozen rescue helicopters have been dispatched to the area, while the main highway between Scotland and England has been closed. The town center of Lockerbie is littered with debris. And it's also understood that the cockpit of the plane hit another town about 6 miles away. This may account for the fact that some people think there were two planes and two explosions. However, the RAF has ruled out any military plane, and it doesn't seem likely a civilian plane would have been that high. An official of Jane's All the World's Aircraft has told us tonight that given the spread of the debris, it certainly seems as though there was an implosion, which would have been caused by a structural failure, or an explosion caused perhaps by a bomb. Peter?
Okay, Barry Dunsmore in London, thanks very much. There is as yet no indication, as you've heard there, that the pilot of the 747 alerted ground controllers there was any emergency, even though one eyewitness said, seen from the ground, it was like a rain of fire. In the cold world of the radar screen, Flight 103 was suddenly just no longer a blip. If the particular suddenness with which this happened is a clue, the experts have not said so yet. ABC's Jim Slade has a report.
On a normal course, a 747 leaving Heathrow for New York would have climbed to 30,000 feet or above by the time Flight 103 disappeared from radar scopes. It would also have been very heavily fueled. Boeing Commercial Aircraft in Seattle say this particular plane was the 15th 747 off their assembly line in 1970, was delivered to Pan Am in February of that year. However, this plane was structurally reinforced for possible military service. Since it was scheduled to cross the Atlantic tonight, it was probably fueled to or near capacity. That means it was still heavily fueled at the time of the crash, adding to the explosion. British authorities say the plane's crew made no comment on the radio, indicating whatever happened took place suddenly without warning. Military authorities there indicate there's no suggestion of another plane in the vicinity, seemingly ruling out a mid-air collision, but that's being investigated. The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, which investigates all accidents involving American aircraft, is sending one man tonight and will send a full team of experts as needed. Boeing's getting up its own team. The FAA is sending people, and the FBI is waiting for developments that might indicate sabotage before sending anyone. All in all, the 747 has a good track record. Most of the accidents involving them have had external causes. 2 747s were destroyed in a runway collision in the Canary Islands. A Japan Airlines 747 crashed when a cracked bulkhead gave way from damage on takeoff. Tonight, the puzzle is what happened at 31,000 feet over Scotland. Peter?
Jim, it's my own experience that there's enormous speculation at the time of air crashes, and reporters almost invariably turn out to be wrong.
You're absolutely correct. There is no way at this point to guess what happened aboard that aircraft. And every time you try to decide from the looks of the thing what happened, you find out in the conclusion of the investigation you were wrong.
Okay, Jim Slade in Washington, thanks very much. Just to reaffirm that Pan Am said just a short while ago that as far as it's aware, there were no survivors on board the aircraft. We have been told from a variety of sources that among the people on board were a number of Syracuse University students who were returning from London, where Syracuse University has an overseas program, that the United Nations Commissioner for Namibia, formerly Southwest Africa, Bernd Carlson, was also reportedly on the plane. And there have been a number of unconfirmed reports, and I emphasize unconfirmed here, that also on board were a number of U.S. servicemen who were coming back from overseas for Christmas. In a moment, the day's other news. The securities firm Drexel Burnham Lambert, a $650 million fine. And later in the broadcast, an experimental new way to fight cancer. On the American agenda, how to teach children about science.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by Top Champagne.